Personal responsibility, or individual responsibility, is the idea that human beings choose, instigate, or otherwise cause their own actions. A corollary idea is that because we cause our actions, we can be held morally accountable or legally liable. This idea, though an appealing fantasy, is fundamentally wrong and leads to terrible ideologies. Howdy, I'm Deoster, and let's talk about personal responsibility. So, the basic idea is, you choose your actions, meaning you create the consequences of your actions, meaning it's your responsibility to deal with those consequences. This all sounds well and good, but the problem is a rotten core. Do we choose our actions? While the instinctive human response is yes, I'm not so sure. Let's talk about advertising for a moment. The whole idea of advertising is to get the name of a company into your head and to associate that name with good things. Let's say that you stop somewhere to eat, and there's a McDonald's and a Burger King, and let's say you've never been to either, but you have seen a commercial for McDonald's recently. In that scenario, you are much more likely to eat at the McDonald's than the Burger King. Your brain still remembers that commercial, and it's human nature to give preference to the familiar. Was that really your choice? Or is it more likely that every choice you make is simply a product of how your brain is structured and how it processes the world around you? Imagine you have a physics problem, and you have to figure out how far a ball would bounce given certain conditions. Well, if you do indeed have every condition that could affect how far the ball would bounce, you can calculate how far it would go with 100% accuracy every time. The same thing can be applied to the McDonald's and Burger King. If you know every experience any given person has had relating to McDonald's and Burger King, and if you know how those experiences will affect their judgment, then you can, with 100% accuracy, predict which they will choose. If you lost all memory of this day from the moment you woke up, and you were transported back to that moment and you had to do the day over again, assuming that nothing else changed about that day, in all likelihood you would make the exact same decisions and end up in the exact same position watching this video. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, free will doesn't exist. It can be a little depressing to think about. You aren't really making any decisions, your future is set for you, you can't escape it. Why even do anything? Why try when all your actions will be forgotten on a long enough timescale? Are you really having an effect on anything in the long run? Why put in all this effort? Why even live? Hey there, let's get back on track, shall we? Just don't think too hard about it, it'll be fine. Life is just an endless series of distractions leading up to an inevitable death, so why not enjoy them? So, where was I? Oh yes, if free will doesn't exist, then we don't really choose our actions, which means the personal responsibility is, to put it scientifically, stupid and dumb. But wait, that doesn't seem right. I mean, we want people to be responsible, right? We can't just let people off the hook for their actions because they were predestined to do them, can we? Well, no, probably not. And that's my next point. Even if free will doesn't exist, on an individual level, it feels like it does. When we make a choice, it feels like it's us making that choice. And similarly, when someone else makes a choice that affects us, we feel like it's them making that choice. It's simply the most practical way of thinking. If someone does something bad to you, your monkey brain wants to punish them, not the set of conditions that cause them to do whatever they did, because you can't feasibly change those conditions on their own, while punishing one person is much more feasible and seems effective. Similarly, when you individually face hardship and oppression, it's probably not very feasible to try to change the system around you causing that, at least in the short term, and taking personal responsibility for the things in your life might help. It's in so many self-help books for a reason. But what if you aren't talking about individuals? What if you're talking about broader society? What if you're talking about politics? Then the cracks begin to show. Personal responsibility is all well and dandy when you're trying to help an individual, but that's not always how it's used. Often, discussions about systemic racism and poverty become muddled with cries of, well, if you don't want to be shot by the police, just take responsibility and don't do crime. Oh, you didn't do a crime and you still got shot? Well, try looking less scary. Well, if you don't want to be poor, then take responsibility and get a job. Wait, you already have a job? Well, get another one. This kind of thinking is used to dissuade trying to change the system. It's much harder to confront a broken system than to say, the system isn't broken, you're broken because you can't succeed in it. But this isn't based in any kind of logic. People, as we have established, are products of their surroundings, so if they're broken, then it still comes down to the system that created them. This type of thinking is simply propaganda used to justify unjustifiable hierarchies, and to make the people at the top of the hierarchies feel better about exploiting those at the bottom. Personal responsibility breaks when looking at systems of people, because you can't just tell people to take some responsibility and expect results. If a kid has bad grades, telling them to just study harder won't do anything. You have to look at the conditions around them, find the root of the problem, and fix it. But many people still believe in this idea of personal responsibility and use it as the core of their worldview. This worldview manifests itself in a particular ideology, neoliberalism, which is now the most widespread political system in the world and currently in the process of collapsing in on itself. It claims to be a meritocracy, a system where the people who most deserve power are the ones that have it. It's also defined by capitalism and pull yourself up by the bootstraps individualism. It cements the idea that if you are unsuccessful, then it must be your fault, and that it's immoral to give anyone a helping hand. These ideas are all personal responsibility manifest, and as you would expect, they are deeply flawed. No matter what the ideals are in practice, because of the way prejudice and poverty compound over time when left unchecked, neoliberalism creates and perpetuates unjust power hierarchies, white over black, rich over poor. Those at the top attempt to convince you that this is natural. Look at social Darwinism, the idea that modern humans are subject to the same laws of natural selection and survival of the fittest that explain evolution. This idea is often used to justify imperialism, racism, eugenics, and, yes, capitalism. This idea is flawed in many ways. Not only does the process of natural selection take much longer than we could reasonably affect as individuals, but it blatantly ignores that the reason that we have gotten so far as a species is because we have unified and helped others with the knowledge that it will help us in the long run. You can't expect people to, of their own volition, start being responsible and for society to fix itself. Personal responsibility can't create effective policy, and it can't sustain bad economic systems. The only way to meaningfully better society is through deep systemic change in people's material conditions. Personal responsibility is useless for politics.